Okay, so you sent over this chapter from Ethics for Behavior Analysts, and we're going to really dive into it today. And it's a juicy one because it's all about how to find the right job, which I think we've all been there, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Scrolling through those job postings, prepping for interviews, hoping to land that perfect position. But what if I told you that dream job could actually turn into an ethical nightmare?
Oh, yeah.
And that's exactly what happened to this one BCBA who reached out to the ABA Ethics Hotline. And their story, which is described in this chapter, it's like a huge wake-up call for all of us.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these issues, these ethical challenges, they're not just these abstract concepts, but they're real situations that real practitioners are facing. And the consequences can be pretty devastating, both personally and professionally.
Absolutely. And so this BCBA reached out because they uncovered some seriously shady stuff happening at their company. And it all kind of boiled down to this intense pressure to put profits before ethical client care. So imagine this. You're a BCBA, and you discover that the treatment plans that you created, that you signed off on, are being altered without your knowledge.
Oh, wow.
And they're being altered to reduce the number of therapy hours that are recommended for your clients.
It's like a blatant disregard for the well-being of the clients, right? They're the ones who are being denied these essential services. And it puts the BCBA in a really tough spot ethically.
Totally. And it gets even worse because in this case, this BCBA discovered that their clinical recommendations were being deleted from these altered plans. So it was like their professional judgment was being silenced. And when they tried to speak up and address these concerns, they were met with resistance, told to basically just go along with the changes. Can you imagine?
It's a huge red flag for sure.
Like having your ethical obligations completely ignored.
Yeah, it points to a toxic company culture where those concerns aren't being addressed openly. And honestly, they're just being swept under the rug.
Totally. And it turns out this wasn't even an isolated incident. This BCBA later discovered that this so-called quality assurance BCBA had actually tampered with almost all of the treatment plans.
Serious.
Signatures were being removed, billing codes were manipulated. It was just a complete disregard for ethical practice, not to mention it's illegal.
Right, altering medical documents, especially when it comes to billing, can have serious legal ramifications.
And it's heartbreaking because at the end of the day, the people who suffer the most are the clients, right?
Yeah.
They're the ones who are receiving fewer therapy hours, potentially missing out on those crucial interventions. And you know what happened to the BCBA in this story? They were terminated after threatening to report these violations to the BACB.
Wow.
It's like they were punished for trying to do the right thing.
I mean, it takes a lot of courage to speak up against those kinds of unethical practices, especially when your job is on the line.
Yeah, and this case really highlights the immense pressure that practitioners are facing in this healthcare landscape where corporate interests are kind of taking over. It's kind of discouraging, but I think this story just underscores how important it is to be proactive during our job search. We need to be able to spot those red flags early on, and that's where the interview process becomes super critical.
Yeah, I agree.
So we really need to go into those interviews armed with the right questions, so we can uncover those ethical red flags before it's too late.
Right, exactly. We want to be proactive, not reactive. Instead of waiting for those red flags to pop up after we've already accepted the job.
Yeah.
You can use those interviews to really dig a little deeper, get a sense of the company's ethical compass, so to speak.
I like that. And this chapter you sent over actually has this whole section on it. And it's they give you this whole list of interview questions that are like little X-ray glasses. They help you see what's really going on beneath the surface.
Yeah. It's about kind of shifting that dynamic a bit, right? You're not just an applicant, you're an informed advocate for yourself, but also for your future clients.
Right.
You have a right to ask these questions.
Totally. So let's dive into some of these questions. This list is long. It's got 25 questions on it.
Oh, wow.
But we can't get to all of them today. So we'll just hit some of the ones that are highlighted as being super revealing. And this first one is so important. How is caseload determined?
Yeah, that's a big one for sure.
Yeah.
I think a good answer would be something like, we follow the BACB guidelines for reasonable workloads. We really prioritize preventing burnout and ensuring quality of care. You want to hear that they've got a system in place, one that really takes those factors into account, like client complexity and the BCBA's experience level.
So what if they dodge the question or give you a vague answer it depends?
That's definitely a red flag for me.
Yeah.
It might mean that they're kind of willing to overload their BCBAs, which of course compromises the quality of therapy for the clients.
Right, because you can't pour from an empty cup. Okay, another question that I thought was really interesting is about supervision. What would be like a really good answer? Something that would indicate they have a supportive and ethically sound supervisory structure.
Ideally, they describe a really structured system,
Hmm.
something that includes like regular individual supervision with a qualified supervisor, but also opportunities for peer supervision or mentorship,
Yeah.
especially for newer BCBAs. Because of that ongoing supervision, it's crucial not just for ethical practice, but also for professional development and growth.
Right, so it's not like you're just thrown into the deep end and that's it. It's about having that ongoing support, that guidance to help you navigate those challenges and keep improving your skills.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about company culture.
Okay.
That could be kind of a tough one to really gauge. In interview, are there any questions that you think could give us some clues? Asking about turnover rates can be really telling, like a high turnover rate, particularly among BCBAs. That's something to watch out for. It could mean they're not providing enough support, or there might be some underlying ethical concerns that are causing people to leave.
That makes a lot of sense. It's also probably a good idea to ask about how employee performance is evaluated.
Yeah.
Like, is it based on, like, objective measures, or is it more about, like, subjective opinions?
You want to see that there's transparency and fairness in their evaluation process. A good answer would show that they have clear performance standards and that any feedback they give is constructive and focused on professional growth, not just tearing people down.
Totally. And speaking of transparency, what about those non-compete agreements? Like, those can be kind of a red flag, right?
Oh, absolutely. The book actually calls those out as being really ethically problematic, especially in a field like ours. You want to be able to actually practice your profession without these crazy restrictions.
Yeah, it seems like a non-compete agreement could really limit a BCBA's options, Like if they wanted to find a job that aligns with their values or even just serve their clients in a way that feels right to them.
Exactly. And in fact, the BHCOE, the Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, they're a pretty well-respected accreditation body in our field. And they've actually come out pretty strongly against those non-compete clauses.
Interesting. So that's definitely something to watch out for. Like if a potential employer gets all weird and cagey when you ask about non-competes, that's not a good sign.
Not at all.
It probably means they're putting their own business interests ahead of the well-being of their employees and clients.
Exactly.
Okay, one last question. This one feels really important. Let's say you get through the interview, everything seems good, they offer you the job, you're excited. They slide that contract across the table. Are you allowed to take some time to review it before you sign?
100%. Yes, absolutely. It is completely reasonable to say, hey, I'd like some time to look this over. Ideally, you can even have an attorney look it over, someone who really understands employment law, just to make sure you're fully aware of what you're signing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big decision, and that contract is legally binding. You don't want to feel pressured to sign something on the spot.
Exactly. And honestly, if the company hesitates at all when you ask to review the contract, that would be a huge red flag for me. A company that's operating ethically and transparently is going to want you to feel comfortable and informed before you commit to anything.
This has been such a helpful conversation. I feel like we're not just passive applicants anymore. We're like ethical detectives, gathering clues.
I love that.
So to wrap things up, any final thoughts for our listeners out there who are on the hunt for that perfect, ethically aligned job?
I think the biggest thing is just to remember that your ethical obligations don't end when you sign that contract. Like if you encounter something later on after you started the job that seems off, document it. Keep detailed records of what happened, any conversations, any actions that you took, and don't be afraid to reach out for support. Talk to trusted colleagues, find a mentor, even reach out to the BACB if you need to.
Yeah, I love that. It's like that saying, if you see something, say something. But in this case, it's if you see something, document it and seek support.
Exactly.
This has been so eye-opening. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
It's been my pleasure, really.
And to our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the ethical considerations of finding the perfect job in the ABA field. Just remember, you have the power to ask those tough questions, advocate for yourself, advocate for your clients, and help create a positive and ethical work environment for everyone. Until next time, everyone, keep those ethical compasses spinning.